not the rule of the mob.
He really laid it out for the future.
And
Rachel, you've done a great job laying it out this morning. It's resist versus results. And that president standing up there saying, you elected me to nominate people that would be faithful to the Constitution. And finally, a politician who wasn't a politician before, was a businessman, delivered.
He absolutely did. And he also laid out, listen, if you want rule of law, remember, that's what he ran on in the 2016 campaign. Sure. Rule of law versus rule of mob. And this week, the left really did a good job of showing what the mob looks like and what they're willing to do in terms of dirty tricks in politics, and also shouting down death threats to our members of Congress and really kind of tearing down our institutions. The president laid that out. I think that's the decision people are going to have to make in November.
He did. I mean, the history, you cannot overstate the history of Brett Kavanaugh being appointed to the Supreme Court, but it was rooted in the president's willing to face that mob, take them head on, head first, and in doing so, inspired Mitch McConnell to do so. And then ultimately, as I mentioned a lot yesterday, even Susan Collins finally said, you know what, the Democrats in this mob has crossed the line. They've gone too far. Yeah. And that's why she had that great quote, which is, when you become too hysterical, fairness goes right out the door.
You made this point last hour, so I like to steal your best points and use them as my own.
They're yours.
The reality is, for conservatives in Washington or elsewhere who've wanted a conservative court, wanted a court faithful to the Constitution, this truly is that moment. And no one thought it would be that businessman or Donald Trump, but it took someone who knew how to fight, as you said, was willing to fight, didn't back away from a nominee who had been totally smeared, and ultimately, as a result, today it's the wrong camera size. 5-4 on the Supreme Court in favor of conservatives, and that means your Second Amendment rights are safe, your freedom of speech, your religious liberty, the rights of unborn children, things that people carry passionate about. This president delivered on. We should take a Sunday morning while you're sipping your coffee before you go to church to think about that fact. That is a huge victory for this country.
That's right. I mean, if you look at what really the conservative think tanks, the Heritage Foundation, the Federalists have talked about, they all hark back to President Ronald Reagan and building a shining city on a hill. Well, if you look at the pieces of those puzzle, it is a conservative court, a strong military, a booming economy, a fair trade deal. He's delivered all of them. Yeah,
it makes me wonder when I think about some of the Never Trumpers, and we all have them in our lives. What more do you want? He's really delivering.
Never Trumpers seem to be what?
Yeah.
Never happy?
They're never happy. Someone else who's not happy is Eric Holder. And here's what he had to say about Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation. He had to put a tweet out. It said, with the confirmation of Kavanaugh and the process which led to it and the treatment of Merrick Garland, the legitimacy of the Supreme Court can justifiably be questioned. The court must now prove through its work that it is worthy of the nation's trust. Very interesting. Already setting up the delegitimacy of the Supreme Court unless, Roberts or somebody else on the court votes the way the liberals want. Then we'll say it's legitimate.
Look out for that. Pro tip. They're going to start pressuring Roberts, who they now see as the most moderate of the justices, the Chief Justice, to become the new Kennedy in the swing vote. We'll see what happens there. All you can do is nominate someone you think is good. We'll see what happens.
And I just want to get in there, too. It's not isolated to Eric Holder, who, by the way, the former attorney general, you think would not go so strident on matters of legal fairness. But you've also got Dianne Feinstein, who was the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, with similar statements challenging the legitimacy of the court that she just went through the process.
We have one institution that Americans generally trust to be fair. It's our Supreme Court.
But that's sort of the socialist thing. Tear down these institutions. Remember, I think it's important to note why Brett Kavanaugh's seat is so important to them, why this fight was so important to them that they were willing to do just about anything to take him down. And that is because the left doesn't like to win or can't win on their ideas, on the power of their ideas and arguments. So they use the deep state and the courts to get what they can't do in the elections. And so with this vote being so crucial, that's why
it was pivotal. And Andy McCarthy made that point as well. He joined us earlier on the program. This is what he had to say.
The fact that they hold high-ranking positions doesn't mean that they're not part of the hard left. And the argument that they make doesn't make any sense. I mean, for example, I think the Justice Department is a legitimate institution. The fact that when Eric Holder was Deputy Attorney General, he used it to carry out the corrupt pardon of Mark Rich doesn't mean to me that there's something wrong with the Justice Department. It means to me there's something wrong with Eric Holder. So that's kind of the way politics works.
That's right. Elections have consequences.
Maybe Eric Holder is going to run for president.
Well, he'll
Well, we
probably be in
haven't
Iowa
that.
or New Hampshire sometime soon, or South Carolina, I have no doubt.
But the president's already dreaming about, I mean, maybe he wants Holder, but he's got a whole list of people that he says he's dreaming about running against.
I'm dreaming of those candidates. I see those candidates before my eyes every night before I go to sleep. Sometimes while I'm sleeping, I love them so much. Cory Booker, Sleepy Joe Biden, who ran for president 2 or 3 times. Remember, he challenged me to a fight? I'd love that. That wouldn't last long. That would not last long. The only reason to vote Democrat is if you're tired of winning, right? Tired of winning. We want to win, win, win.
You know, these midterms are hugely consequential for his agenda and for what Washington looks like for the next 2 years. But you can tell in his campaign style, he's almost ready to litigate the success of his last 2 years versus the resistance that he's faced. He didn't just mention Spartacus, which will be his nickname forever, and Cory Booker, but also he mentioned Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
He said, I have more Native American blood in me than she does, daring her to take a DNA test, which will haunt her through the election until she does.
No question about that. But he's so smart to lay out these wins because they really are significant. This is a presidency that has had, you know, the media pound on it non-stop. And so, you know, there's the Obama administration, I think, was a lot of hype. And this is a presidency built on solid ground, on results. So you can knock him for his style, but imagine Donald Trump without these wins. I mean, this is a presidency. You look at 51%, it's not about hype. It's totally about results.
Yeah, because the media will never give him
They'll
credit.
never give him credit.
In fact, you know, on the failing New York Times this morning, just one little column about the confirmation, some pictures, but just, you know, if they really think it's important, they splash the whole headline with a headline of the confirmation. They got little itty bitty over here, 50 to 48, just a reminder that they're never cheering for him. They'll never be for him. He has to do it on his own.
Well, you know who is for him is a lot of our viewers. We've got some of your comments coming in. But we're not going to give them to you just yet. That's a tease.
That's a tease, and I'm going to give you some headlines, though. All right. The husband of a missing elementary school teacher is fearing for the worst after police discover a body nearly 500 yards behind their home. Medical examiners in Maine will now determine whether or not it's 47-year-old Kristen Westra. She was reported missing on Monday after her husband noticed she left without her car or her cell phone. A Washington Post contributor is missing, and authorities believe he was killed inside Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul. Washington Post sources say a 15-member Saudi Arabian team attacked Jamal Khashoggi in a pre-planned murder. The Saudi Arabian journalist is a known critic of the country's leadership. The consulate is claiming that these claims are baseless. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo meeting with the South Korean President Moon Jae-in in just moments, or actually just moments ago. The top U.S. diplomat arriving in Seoul this morning following a visit to North Korea. Pompeo writing on Twitter, critical nuclear talks with Kim Jong-un are making progress. He'll wrap up his East Asia tour with a stop in China.
And now, yes, thank you, Rachel. A look now at your Major League Baseball playoffs. Aaron Judge, all rise, powers the New York Yankees past the Red Sox.
A ball and a strike, and Sanchez. High drive, way back, deep left center field. Goodbye. My goodness, Aaron Judge.
Gary Sanchez also hit 2 home runs in that game. Judge and Sanchez leading the Yankees to a 6-2 win in Boston to knot the series at 1 game apiece. And Houston pitcher moving on to another game. Garrett Cole striking out 12 batters in a rout to a 3-1 win over the Cleveland Indians. And the Astros out of Houston, they're looking to close out the series tomorrow night. It is October. It is baseball, which means it's baseball, which means it's football, which means basketball is coming and hockey. It's a great moment to be a sports fan.
Do you know I've never been to a professional baseball game ever?
Whoa.
I know.
I think we now have a future segment for this
Maybe
show.
we should do that.
Pete, Rachel, and Griff go to Yankee Stadium.
Well, let me tell you what's coming up next. Not baseball, but we do have David Bossie joining us with his biggest winners and losers from the Kavanaugh confirmation process. You don't want to miss it.
Plus, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says there's a way to prevent more Justice Kavanaughs, and she says it's by getting rid of the Electoral College. Seriously, this is what socialists do.
The Senate finally confirmed now Justice Brett Kavanaugh after a months-long bruising battle that caused deep divisions between the two parties and have some questioning who are the real winners in this Supreme Court confirmation. Joining us now to discuss the Supreme Court showdown is former Trump campaign manager David Bossie. David, thanks for joining us this morning. So I'm going to ask you three questions out front so you don't get ahead of yourself. Who won, who lost, and will the Never-Trumpers ever admit that this president has delivered on that agenda? So first, start, who won in this confirmation battle?
Clearly, President Trump won and the American people won. President Trump promised during the campaign of 2016 to deliver great constitutional conservatives to the Supreme Court and to the federal judiciary, and he has delivered on that now as second Supreme Court justice. It is an enormous victory and an enormous week for the president. Look, you had unemployment at 3.7, a 49-year low. You have wages increasing by almost 3% this week. You have the renegotiation of the bad NAFTA deal and bringing Canada into that Mexico agreement. Another great victory for this president. So you have his win just continues. I don't think he's getting tired of winning, but he might be close. But look, we also have Lindsey Graham and we also have Chuck Grassley as huge winners this week. Yeah. Pivotal moments during the hearing, pivotal moments for the chairman to lead this process. Mitch McConnell, another enormous winner. Yep. We have to recognize that the Never Trump movement, the establishment, has come together over one issue. And that was Brett Kavanaugh. One issue has galvanized this movement, if you will, and brought everyone together. And I think 30 days before the election, this midterm election, it's so vital that we keep this up, because if you look at the chaos, let's go to the losers. You look at the chaos, the mob mentality of the left. That's all they have, the anger and the hatred. They have nothing else. They have no agenda for the American people. So if you look at what they're about, if you transform that, you look forward to the November election, that is what you get. You get more chaos if you elect Democrats to control the House. That is all you're going to get, is investigations and undoing what the president has attempted to do.
No, the president laid that out very nicely last night as well. But you've been in Washington for a couple of decades. You've seen how the as a knife fighter, how the conservative movement has evolved. Will those who were not supportive of this president initially, eventually, going forward, recognize that he is implementing the agenda they could only have dreamed of?
You know what? It's such an important question. It's really about the personalities. And I think if you removed Donald Trump's name from the presidency, and it was President John Smith, if you will, you would have conservatives and these Never-Trumpers championing what he is doing, his record on the economy, his national security, building up our national defense, our federal judiciary, his appointments, his deregulatory approach to government.
Yep.
You would see them just putting him on a pedestal, but they cannot get themselves. They cannot get to do that because they dislike him personally. It is really a disservice to the conservative movement, because there's a lot of these folks that are just disingenuous now. And you look at this Jennifer Rubin, who's a so-called conservative at the Washington Post. That's the fake news right there. She's not a conservative and hasn't been in a long time.
All right, David, come to New York City soon and let's have a couple beers for Brett. Is that a deal?
I would love to do that.
All right, done deal. David Bossie, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. All right, well, conservative women come together to have their voices heard. Rachel takes us to the special summit for women supporting President Trump. That's coming up next on the program. Democrats threatening to take down Judge Brett Kavanaugh if they take back control this November. New York Democrat Jerrold Nadler vowing to open an investigation, saying, quote, the Senate having failed to do its properly constitutionally mandated job of advising consent, we're going to have to do something to provide a check and balance to protect the rule of law and the legitimacy of one of our most important institutions. Here to react, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus and the author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump, Alan Dershowitz. Mr. Professor, thank you. If the Dems take the House, they say they want to impeach. Can they? Should they?
They can't. It would be unconstitutional to institute impeachment proceedings against a sitting justice for something that they accuse him of doing when he was a 17-year-old private citizen. It would violate the core concept of the Constitution. What they would do then is they would try to make up an argument that, no, they're impeaching him because he lied about what he did 35 years ago, And of course, that's what they tried to do with Bill Clinton. And the same Democrats complained about that, calling it a ploy. Look, for the sake of the American people, we have to move forward. The Democrats have to stop trying to have these revenge inquisitions. Let Justice Kavanaugh sit. Let him serve as a justice. Let's evaluate him as a justice. I won't like some of his decisions. He wouldn't have been my choice. I'm a liberal Democrat. But for the sake of the country, move forward.
Professor,
don't try to take.
I have so much respect for you, and I have to ask you about that, because you wrote a piece on FoxNews.com. You said, I'm a liberal Democrat. I want to see the House flipped. But I don't want to see is a Democratic House abuse its authority by conducting vengeful impeachment proceedings against Kavanaugh. From Maxine Waters to Nancy Pelosi to now this chair of the House Judiciary Committee. How can you as a liberal Democrat want the House to flip and also not want impeachment proceedings? Because that's what they're going to do.
Well, I want to see checks and balances on the three branches of government, and I think having the Democrats control the House is a good thing for America, but I will fight tooth and nail.
But you wrote a book about not impeaching the president, and that's what they're going to try to do.
They shouldn't do it, and I will fight them on that. That's what democracy is all about. You don't pick sides. I'm a Democrat, but I'm going to fight the Democrats. There are Republicans who will fight the Republicans if they try to abuse their authority. That's what checks and balances is about. You know, it's not like you pick a side and then you always support everything on their side. It's complicated. I'm going to fight for a Democratic House, but once it happens, I'm going to fight against the Democrats abusing their House. There are many things the Democrats can do to keep our country safe, to keep our country under control with checks and balances. This is not one of them.
No,
and it would be a
I'm just being honest with you. It's hard for me. Like, I don't feel like I would fight for a Republican majority if I felt like the immediate they got the majority, they would do things I didn't believe in. So, I mean, it seems like cognitive dissonance, but I understand exactly what you're saying.
I agree with that. The problem is it's not everybody in the Democratic side who's calling for that. That's why I think if the Democrats come in, there should be and there will be an internal fight as to who controls the Democrats. Look, I think the Democrats hurt themselves terribly in this campaign, and I'm no longer predicting that they are going to necessarily take over. They have shot themselves in the foot repeatedly, but I'm not going to allow these radical Democrats, these hard-left Democrats, to make me leave the party that I've supported for 50 years of my life. I'm going to fight within the party for
God
justice.
Bless you. Professor Alan Dershowitz, God bless you for that fight. It's not an easy one, and we respect it. Thank you very much for your time. More Fox and Friends on the other side. Welcome back. By the numbers. First, $360,000. That's the street value of marijuana that agents seized in two buses along the Texas-Mexico border. The drugs, they weighed more than 450 pounds, more than that hacker in his basement. Next, $1.3 million. That's how much the late Senator John Glenn's Maryland home just sold for. Before joining Congress, the former astronaut became the first American born to orbit the Earth. He died at age 95 2 years ago. And finally, $723 million. That's how much money is up for grabs in the Powerball and Mega Million jackpots combined. Rachel Griff.
Thanks. If I win the Powerball, Pete, I'm going to buy a Banksy portrait. All right. Melania Trump wrapping up her first solo international trip with a clear message to the biased media.
That's very important, what I do, what we're doing with U.S. aid, and what I do with my initiatives. And I wish people would focus on what I do, not what I wear.
The First Lady referring to the biting press coverage of her clothing during high-profile trips, including yesterday's hat, criticized as colonial style. Here to react, GOP strategist Kimberly Glasick. Kimberly, welcome.
Good morning.
So I have to say, I'm gonna take a little bit of a different stance with Melania. If you don't want people to talk about your clothes, stop looking so fabulous, right? I mean, I'm sorry, right?
I know, right? I know, it's bad. So when we talk about media bias, we usually talk about the president, but media bias is most evident with our First Lady Melania Trump. I mean, if you think about it, the left has a missed opportunity here. They could say, look, we have our first immigrant First Lady in the White House. It's Melania Trump. So obviously, our immigration system isn't broken. It works just fine. Look at her journey. But instead, they can't get past the fact that she's both beautiful and intelligent. To them, they're mutually exclusive. And so for me, with this trip to Africa, it's another missed opportunity. You saw so many publications writing about what she was wearing or whether or not she likes President Trump's tweets when they should have been talking about the pressing issues in Africa.
Well, Kimberly, let me ask you this. How much do you believe, how important do you believe it is that she's finally taking her critics head on and speaking out and speaking up for herself?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, think about it. Our First Lady, she could speak 7 languages fluently, right? So she could address her haters in so many different ways, but she chooses not to. But this time she finally did say something, and I'm happy that she did. She stood up for herself and said, focus on my work, don't focus on my clothes. And she's right about that. I mean, think about it. Michelle Obama once said, do not wait for someone to tell you that you're special. And I agree with that. And I love that she's still doing a lot of great work despite negativity.
All right, let's look at what she is doing. She visited Ghana, Malawi, Kenya, Egypt. She visited schools, embassies, hospitals, an orphanage. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I know this segment is that she doesn't want us to talk about her clothes, but she did it all in style, didn't she?
She did. She looked great. And that's all we heard about. You know, it's almost as if the left thinks the American public is either really shallow or really stupid, and all we care about are her clothes.
We can do both. I think your point is we can talk about the great work she's doing, and we can be proud of the fact that she really makes us all look good. She is definitely her own person, and it is interesting that she's fighting back and taking on her critics head on. Right?
Absolutely. Yes, I agree.
Kimberly, I was in Texas, down on the border near El Paso, when she came down because the children were being separated from their families, and it was a very important moment. Do you believe that as she takes on her critics, it'll help elevate, whether she's in Africa or the Texas border, it'll help elevate her impact on these issues?
I think so, but I don't know, because there's just so much bias. It's almost like no matter what she does, no matter what the president does, they just don't want them to win. They don't want them to look like that they're in a positive light or to shine in any way. So I think she should just press forward, do what she's doing. People like myself and you, we all know that she's doing a great job, and we don't have to read the New York Times or anything else to find out about what she's wearing tomorrow.
Well, Kimberly, very early on, they said, do not normalize the left, the media, they said, don't normalize this family. And I think Melania, despite doing a fabulous job, and as I continue to say, doing it in style, despite doing that, she is taking the brunt. They are focusing on her, and they're not going to give her a break. And she's just got to plow forward and do what she's doing, because it's just not going to happen. It's 2 years in. So, all right, Kimberly, thanks for joining us. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. And you did great.
Thanks, Kimberly. Much appreciated.
Thanks.
And you know, it's fascinating, too, because she's an immigrant, whether she's in Africa or in the Texas-Mexico border. They understand the importance of her role as First Lady, being a true immigrant.
Griff, my mom is an immigrant American, and she has a special connection with Melania because of that, and I'm sure lots of other people do. All right, Democrats taking their fight against Justice Kavanaugh to the next level. They're now questioning the legitimacy of the Supreme Court.
In other news, apparently they want to shut down the Supreme Court. Let's bring in Andy McCarthy, Fox News contributor and former U.S. attorney. Andy, you're always a voice of clarity in these moments. So you've got a confirmation of a Supreme Court justice. You've got these protests. What further level could they take it to? Now they're questioning the legitimacy of the Supreme Court.
Well, Pete, I think that, you know, what we're seeing is actually something that's going to redound to the detriment of Democrats. I think, you know, these protests are kind of self-selecting, and in the sense that this particular incident has drawn Democrats to, you know, the radical hard left of Democrats to come out and protest, and their audibility is more impressive than their actual numbers are. But the effect that they've had is to galvanize Republicans and the right in a way that nothing else has in the last 2 years. So I think ultimately this is part of our politics, and it'll end up backfiring.
Yeah, but Andrew, it's not just the hard left. I mean, take a look at the tweets we've seen just in the last 24 hours. Former Attorney General Eric Holder tweeting this: with the confirmation of Kavanaugh in the process which led to it in the treatment of Merrick Garland, the legitimacy of the Supreme Court can justifiably be questioned. The court must now prove through its work that it is worthy of the nation's trust. And one more from the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Dianne Feinstein, tweeting, confirming Brett Kavanaugh in the face of credible allegations of sexual assault that were not thoroughly investigated, and his belligerent partisan performance in last Thursday's hearing undermines the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. These are the Democrat leaders and a former attorney general.
Yeah, but the fact that they hold high-ranking positions doesn't mean that they're not part of the hard left.
So true.
And the argument that they make doesn't make any sense. I mean, for example, I think the Justice Department is a legitimate institution. The fact that when Eric Holder was Deputy Attorney General, he used it to carry out the corrupt pardon of Mark Rich doesn't mean to me that there's something wrong with the Justice Department. It means to me there's something wrong with Eric Holder. So that's kind of the way politics works.
Yeah, we have institutions, and there are people within those institutions that change the fabric of them. As someone who studies the Supreme Court, again, to step back a little bit, what does the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh mean as far as the balance of the court and the types of rulings we will see?
Well, I think that Justice Kavanaugh is a careful conservative justice, which, as I think Mike Lee, the great senator from Utah, pointed out yesterday, being a conservative justice is not the same thing as being a conservative politician. What I think you're going to find with Justice Kavanaugh is that he will faithfully apply the Constitution, which doesn't guarantee conservative outcomes. And it's not really what conservatives are looking from the court. We're not looking for the judicial imposition of conservative policies. What we want is a system that is reflective of what the framers gave us in the Constitution, which is that we, through our Democratic representatives in Congress, make policy, and the court decides the hard legal questions, but it doesn't go out of its way to usurp legislative power. And I think that's what you'll see under Justice Kavanaugh.
Andy, I love your articles in National Review. You have one that just came out, a piece called about how the left criminalizes politics by weaponizing investigations. Can you give us a little preview for those who haven't read it yet about what you mean by that?
Yeah, Rachel, what we usually say is that we want the FBI and prosecutors, like I was for 20 years, to be aggressive. But we say that in a very particular context, which is criminal investigations, which are by their nature limited and finite. In other words, a guy robs a bank. What prosecutors and investigators say is there's 3 or 4 elements that you have to prove bank robbery. You either prove them or you can't, and then you move on to the next investigation. What we're now seeing is this idea of being aggressive transposed from its proper context, which is criminal investigations, to things like background checks and counterintelligence investigations. So what you have is you're asking the FBI and other investigators to be as aggressive as possible, but there's no underlying crime. So really you're persecuting a person rather than investigating a criminal transaction, which I just think is wrong.
Well, but it's the natural progression. We saw under the Obama administration the weaponization of agencies against citizens for political reasons. This is the next step.
Right.
Yeah. Andy McCarthy, will you be the next Attorney General,
perfectly
please?
said. It's logical.
Yeah.
Will you be the next Attorney General?
Hey, I've always been very content to be on the signature line rather than defend it in the caption.
I have no power,
and
but
if we can keep it that way, I'm good.
All right, you got it. Well done. Keep it up. Thank you, Andy McCarthy.
Thank you, Andy. Great seeing you.
Thank you.
All right, now we've got some headlines for you.
All right, I'll do those if you don't mind.
No, please do.
Okay. So some would-be thieves failed to bulldoze their way to cash. They tried using a tractor to steal an ATM from a Colorado Wells Fargo bank before running away and leaving it behind. The loader was taken from a nearby construction site and no arrests have been made. Fury over Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh is sparking the left to fight for change. Students and alumni at the Savannah College of Arts and Design in Georgia are demanding Justice Clarence Thomas's name be stripped from a building where he was an altar boy. Their petition is called "Take a Sexual Predator's Name Off of SCAD's Building." It stems from Thomas's nomination for the Supreme Court in 1991 and Anita Hill's sexual assault allegations against him. Wow. President Trump is sending a message to national anthem kneelers. Stand up for America. The phrase is printed on the front of football jerseys his campaign website is selling. The red, white, and blue shirts supporting the number 45, a flag on the sleeve, along with Trump sewn on the back. They're selling for $99 each. Wow, that really is capitalism.
I just got $99 poorer.
Yeah. And watch your step. That's the warning from deputies after this monster alligator decided to be the doormat at someone's home. Louisiana deputies posting photos on Facebook saying, just another day in the life. They eventually shoo the 6-foot-long beast away from the front door, but the gator was not happy. So when you drain the swamp in D.C., this is where they go.
It landed at your doorstep.
Yeah.
You got to go somewhere.
Yes, unless it was weather related. I don't think the alligator came through the weather, but we'll ask Rick Regmuth and ask him, are alligators possibly in the weather?
Those alligators were there before any swamp was. They were there first, and they will be there last as well.
That's true. They will
amazing.
They will
I know.
survive.
All right, guys, let's talk a little bit of weather out there. A lot going on. In fact, one tropical storm we're watching is about to become a tropical storm. This, you see that all that energy there just off of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. That's going to move off towards the north. Have not talked about this much because it's developing quickly. We potentially could have a hurricane on our doorstep maybe sometime Wednesday right around the panhandle of Florida. So not much time to prepare. Not a big chance that it will become a very, very strong hurricane, but could be maybe at a minimal hurricane. That said, take a look at this. There's two stripes of rain. The one right there on the East Coast, across parts of the Panhandle, that is the moisture that's going to be coming from this tropical system, which might become a hurricane, by the way, would be called Matthew. But you look at all that moisture across the Central Plains, that's a much bigger concern, actually. We're going to be watching very significant flooding over the next few days. Spots around parts of Oklahoma could be seeing up to 8 inches of rain, and that will cause some localized flooding, certainly. All right, guys, back to you inside.
Hey, Rick, can you see us? We're actually listening to you. You asked us yesterday. We're watching. We're listening.
I'm going to shame you guys into this
Great job,
eventually.
Rick. I know that could become a hurricane named Matthew. Thank you very much.
No, did I say Matthew?
You did.
It's Michael.
Michael.
I don't know if I said Matthew or if you weren't really listening. I don't know what it was.
We'll check the tape on that, Rick.
Somebody play it back.
All right, thank you, sir. President Donald Trump's winning streak, as you know, continues.
We want to win, win, win. We never get tired of winning.
You won't. We were debating Matthew and Michael. You won't see this on any other network, but we're going to break down all of his big wins this past week.
And the Army needs new recruits, so we're getting put through basic training on Fox Square to show you what it's like. That's coming, and that guy's totally.
And I'm going to do it in heels. So I have to. It's too cold.
Celebrating a series of fresh accomplishments, confirming a second justice to the Supreme Court, an economy on fire with the unemployment rate notching another record low, and minting a new trade deal with Canada and Mexico, just one of many of the list of winnings. Here to react is financial analyst Heather Zumaraga. Heather, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good.
If you look at the record low unemployment, 3.7%, it's the lowest it's been since 1969. The increase in wages, 2.8% increase in wages per year. And you look at the president, he was talking about it last night, and of course his rally. What do you make of this progress? We're only 2 years into this administration.
You're right. We're at the lowest levels of unemployment since 1969. Manufacturing and construction jobs are on the rise. Wages are picking up at 2.8%, and it's only going to get better. So this is another win for President Trump, the 96th straight month of employment gains, making it a record. This is great.
And you know, Heather, you come on in the mornings a lot. You and I talk in the hallways down in Washington, where I'm normally reporting, and we were talking about Kavanaugh. Now, of course, making history, Justice Brett Kavanaugh. How significant do you think this accomplishment is?
Oh, I think it's a big accomplishment for President Trump. You couple that with the economic agenda of deregulation, tax cuts, and the fact that the market's near all-time highs. And this economy looks very good. This is a big win for President Trump heading into the midterm elections, and it will help Republicans. It will be a talking point. And I think corporate tax cuts from a financial perspective will continue to fuel stock prices higher and the economy higher as well.
How high can this economy go? I mean, literally, you know, President Trump was joking about vote Democrat when you're tired of winning. But when we talk about how high it could go,
no one's ever tired of winning.
Where's the ceiling?
Yeah, I think the beginning of tax cuts is just the foundation has been put in place for middle-income Americans on an individual side as well as corporate tax cuts. You look at tax cuts 2.0 that may pass. Yeah. I don't think we'll get that passed before the midterms. But this is just the beginning of a long economic expansion. We're definitely in a bull market cycle. And it's not going to be over anytime soon.
And Heather, I can't let you go unless I get to the news that wasn't really mentioned as much as it possibly should have been, and that is a new NAFTA deal now called the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement. He renamed it, and he's got a new agreement. How significant is that?
I applaud the USMCA deal. This gives U.S. dairy farmers better access to Canada. It also protects our auto workers. More car parts have to be made in North America now than ever before, and 40% of a car has to be made by workers making at least $16 an hour. That means that we're protecting U.S. manufacturing jobs from being shipped to Mexico because of cheap labor. So this deal will make the U.S. A manufacturing powerhouse once again.
Wow, it's going to be something to watch. All right, Heather Zumaraga, thank you very much. Have a great Sunday.
Good to see you.
All right, Cory Booker and Joe Biden. Guess what? President Trump is dreaming about them. He explains why. That's coming up. And the Army needs new recruits, so we're getting put through basic training on Fox Square to show you what it's like. There they are. That's the Army. Oh, there's Pete.
Okay, got it.
Oh, we doing it?
Oh, we're doing it?
Well, the U.S. Army is looking for new recruits.
And right now, our own Pete Hegseth and Griff Jenkins are warming up to see if they've got what it takes to make it through basic training.
Yeah, and here to show us how it's done is Lieutenant Colonel Judd Flores and Sergeant First Class Barrett Hansen, along with several U.S. soldiers. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
All right, so you're kind of always looking for recruits, right?
We are.
But are we having a harder time because kids maybe aren't as in good of a shape as they used to be?
That definitely has an impact. Last year, the Army did miss its recruiting goal, but put in 70,000 recruits, which is more so than the Army has done since 2010. And physical qualifications are a large part of that.
You must be low on recruits if Pete and Griff are the new. So tell us what they're going to do next.
So they're going to run through some of the physical qualifications it takes to be a soldier.
Okay.
Right now, across the United States,
Face them.
Okay.
71% of young men and women are not qualified.
71%?
71%. And a large part of that is the physical attributes we look for in a soldier.
Okay, that also means that 29% are qualified, though.
It does.
Show them how to do it.
What are we doing?
All right.
We're doing mountain climbers, push-ups.
I want to show up these youngsters.
This is Sergeant First Class.
We got mountain climbers out here.
All
He's
right,
gonna
so
demonstrate.
they're going to do 5 mountain climbers.
Let's do 5 mountain climbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we're going to move into
Now
push-ups now.
Push-ups.
Sergeant's doing push-ups. Go ahead, Sergeant.
All right, 5 push-ups.
2,
Griff, good
3,
form.
4,
Come on.
5. There we go. Now we're going to go to sit-ups. Now we're going to go to
Who's going to hold my feet? Come on.
Look at this.
And now 5 sit-ups.
There you go.
I'm worried
There
about
we go.
helping these sit-ups.
Now let's
Come on,
take these
Griff, let's
10
go.
pounds.
We're never going to move
Overhead.
this.
And we're doing lunges.
With the discs.
Keep those arms extended. That's
Arms
working
extended,
shoulders.
Pete.
Let's
Arms
go.
up. Arms up. Extend it up.
All the way
Love it.
through the bars.
Come on, Griff.
All the way to the
And then
And
let's
then
get a pull-up. Let's get a pull-up, baby.
Griff, you're up first.
All right.
Wait, why? Because you need some time to
I need
take a
some
break?
rest.
You need a rest?
Some rest.
This way.
All the way up, all the way down. All you gotta do is one, bro. Ready?
There we go.
3 more for boxing first. 3.
All right. So now you guys Now you guys know what it is. Why don't we do it and compete, and we'll see who can do it
wanna
first.
compete?
Yeah. All right, so
we ought to
now
compete
you know
again?
what to
That
do.
was great.
Get back and
That was
start.
great.
No chance.
You've got 45 seconds to make it through the whole thing.
What are we doing?
45 seconds to go, starting
Whole thing.
right now. Okay, 5 mountain climbers. Oh, Pete is doing the mountain. Oh, he's going straight into the push-ups.
There you go.
Oh!
I got your feet.
All right, wardrobe, get Pete a new shirt.
5, 2. Oh, here we go. 25-pounder.
But he's gonna take it. Come on,
What are we
Rick,
talking
you can
about?
do it.
Arms
You can
extended.
do it,
Rick,
Rick.
Why did you do this?
All the way, all the way.
What is this?
Come on.
1 point.
That's it. Right in.
There you go.
There you go.
Come on, Rick. Come on.
There you go.
That's my man right there.
Good job.
Good job. Good
How do you
job.
guys feel?
Great
How was
job.
It's a workout. I thought about joining the Army. I don't know that I'm qualified at this
Yeah,
point.
you guys are breathing really heavy.
19 years old.
Yes.
Easier.
This is the New York City recruiting battalion, right?
It is.
Keep on recruiting.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right,
Please.
listen,
Well,
if
still
you can do it,
ahead.
you can do it.
We have Michelle Malkin, David Bossi, Maria Bartiromo, and Ken Starr all here live.
Oh,
Coming up next.
Griff's not stopping.
Done.
Never enough for Griff.
You need to go farther down.
Deeper. Deeper.